Hello, everybody. So, like Sharie said, this is the court process. If you have any questions at any point, please jump in the chat any point. I know it can be kind of a confusing process, and we're all here to learn. So, first, we will start um, with who's in the courtroom and kind of the big news. There is a new judge in the courtroom. The judge is Carl Metz. The judge is the decision maker. In the courtroom, he hears all of the sides and he makes the final decision. So, he's the one that at the end of the day has the final say in everything. And then you also have what we refer to as the ASAs or the assistant state's attorneys. Those are Brett Dunbar and Taylor Nesbitt. They decide to bring the case into court. They are the state. They are the ones prosecuting the case. They are the ones who write the petition of adjudication of wardship and the termination of parental rights. So their goal is to prove those petitions. So when you get your first case and you go through your adjudication of petition of wardship, and there's line after line after line and A, B, C, they wrote that and it's their goal to prove that that happened. And that's their only goal. They aren't there for the minors and they aren't there for the parents. They're really there kind of for themselves, but it often ends up being more on the child side, but they're there to really prove their own case. Also, who's in the courtroom? You have the DCFS legal. His name is Paul Carpenter. He is there to ensure DCFS follows all of their rules and regulations. He sometimes he's turned to when I don't know what this goal should be. Should the goal be return home or should it be there was one case where return home wasn't really possible, but they didn't know what it should be because parents were doing what they should be doing. And he was the one who came up with what should be happening. He's the caseworker's attorney. He's there to just really make sure DCFS is doing what they're doing. If a service plan is inadequate from a caseworker, he's kind of the first one there to figure it out. Not all of the time he's there, but most of the time he's there. So sometimes people are like, is he there? Is he not? He should be there, but he's not at super consistent. You will always see the judge and you will always see the state's attorneys. He's a little bit more, it depends. And then who else? We have the guardian ad litem, the GAL. This is the lawyer for the minors. Their goal is the minor's best interest. There's normally one GAL per case. So even if you have six kids on a case, you will have one GAL for all of those kids. Their goals might not be the same. So you really need to kind of advocate for those kids separately because they might, one might be returned home where the other shouldn't be returned home. And you should know why. In talking to the GAL, and they know the case. They're there for those specific children. They're the ones we go to when we have any concerns with the case or if something happens on the case and we need somebody to know, they're the first person we go to. Besides the caseworker. In the court, they're the first person we go to. The parent's attorney. This one we get a lot of questions about. Sometimes the parents' attorneys fight for things that are kind of off the wall things. We sit there and we think, why would they do that? But we have to remember that's their job. They are there to represent the parents despite the best interest of the minors. Their main goal is to return the children home. That's what they're getting paid for. That is their job. So when you hear a case has just opened and they say, let's return the kids home, and everyone is like, no, that's not right. That's their job. And even though we think it's crazy, we just have to remember that they're doing what they should be. These are the common names. So in our courtroom, the GAL and the parents' attorneys rotate. So one day they might be a GAL, on one case they might be a GAL, the next case they might be the parent's attorney. They kind of just rotate. It depends who's in and all of that. You'll see Camille Goodwin, Elizabeth Ellis, Danielle Wozniak, Steve Janicki, Katie Glenn, and Robert Winden. Those are kind of your main people that you'll see. And parents can hire outside attorneys, but those are kind of the main players in the juvenile courtroom. So this is kind of what a lot of people ask about, and this is the map of the courtroom. So most of you are familiar with being in court, but if you're not, this is kind of what you can expect. Everybody has their assigned spot, and you kind of just fill in the pieces. The state's attorney is always going to sit on the end. The GAL normally sits on the corner, but that isn't always the case. This is kind of just the gist of it, but they don't have to necessarily follow this. If they're not in this spot, it doesn't mean they're going to hold up court, but this is the normal flow. The parents will sit up at the table, and the caseworker, foster parents, CASA, all of us will sit in the back two rows. Either row is fine. But it's and those are the only people allowed in the courtroom. Besides, everybody else on the screen would be the caseworker, the foster parents, and CASA. There's friends of parents and all of that should not be in the courtroom as it is a closed courtroom. So the types of hearings. So these do go in order somewhat. So first, you have the shelter care hearing. So when the state's attorney decides to bring in a case, they have a shelter care hearing. This happens within 48 hours of a child being removed from their home. This is normally where CASA is nominated. They oftentimes are. The only time they're really not nominated is when the state's attorney forgets, and then we're nominated at the next court date. This is the first court appearance, and this is a mini hearing of itself. The parents can present evidence, the state will present evidence, and it's kind of an impromptu hearing. The parents' goal is to have the child be returned to them, whether that be an intact case or to close the case completely. And the state's goal is to keep the child removed from the home. If the child is either remaining intact with the family but still have an open case, or if the child is still removed in foster care, it will then go to adjudication. This happens 90 days after the shelter care hearing. This is kind of what most people call guilty or not guilty. Those words aren't used in this courtroom. It's a civil courtroom, not a criminal courtroom, so you won't actually hear those words. But most of us have watched Law and Order or something like that, and those words just click with us a little bit more. This is a trial. Witnesses are called. There's subpoenas for medical records and all of that. If they don't want to go to a trial, parents can then stipulate. When you stipulate, a parent is agreeing that that happened, so that the state could prove that that happened. So the parents aren't necessarily saying, I'm guilty. They're just saying the state would have enough evidence to prove that this happened. It's like pleading guilty, and they do not have to plead or stipulate to all of the paragraphs. So when you have that petition of adjudication of wardship, sometimes they're multiple pages long, and they just need to stipulate to enough that it shows that abuse or neglect happened. And that could just be one paragraph. Even if it's 3 pages long, the state is really just looking for at least one main one, but most of the time they're looking for more. For either of these hearings, there is no CASA report needed. Disposition happens 30 days after adjudication. This is the sentencing. So this is when the goal is set. So is it going to be return home in 12 months? And we'll talk about all of those in a little bit. But this is when that goal is kind of set in stone. The service plan is officially ordered to be complied with. So previously, before disposition, it's kind of like the caseworker is saying, you should comply with this. It would be beneficial. but after disposition, it is set in stone and they are now court ordered, court mandated to complete these services. This is when the first CASA report is due to your advocate manager 2 weeks prior to dispositions. Gets a little hard with the timing of the adjudication and the disposition. So you'll want to talk to your advocate manager about all of the timing and all of that. But that's our first CASA report. So we love to have a report on file for disposition. Reviews are an overview of what happened from the last court date. It's mainly progress on the parents, but they're also any concerns are brought up with parents, with visits, sibling visits, any kind of concerns that could be brought up. That's what the GAL will bring up. That's what the reports will kind of indicate, and anybody can bring up. These happened about every 3 months, but they are case dependent. Sometimes cases won't have reviews at all and they'll just skip them completely. And sometimes they'll happen more frequently because there's concerns and they need to be checked up on. And we want CASA reports on these as well. The judge will set when the court dates are and when we need them. The judge will also look kind of to everybody else on when and if reviews are needed. These are not mandated whatsoever. Dispositions and adjudications are mandated. Next, we have statuses. So statuses and reviews often get confused. Statuses are an update on one specific thing. So a status of a subpoena, the state is looking for that specific subpoena. Or a status of attorney, did natural mother obtain an attorney? It's one specific thing that they're checking up on. This is kind of dependent on case if a report's going to be in or not. You'll talk to your advocate manager. It's a case by case basis on that. Permanency hearings are oftentimes when the goal is changed. So this is, you have your disposition, and then this is going to be your kind of your first time where most of the time the goal will be changed. Are the natural parents fit, able, and willing? You'll hear that. You'll hear efforts and progress. And are the parents making efforts? Are they making progress? And this goes back from the last permanency or the disposition. So say parents made progress from 2 months ago. Oftentimes they won't say that they found progress or efforts because it only happened in 2 months. They are looking for that whole time period. And it's about every 6 months when the child's not living in the home. If it's an intact case, you do not have permanency hearings. This could be a whole hearing as well. If natural parents want to bring up evidence, they can. If they want to call witnesses, they can. They can call caseworkers to testify. We do always want to have a CASA report submitted for this. It's really crucial that our CASA reports are in because this is when they often are going to change the goal. And we want our information to kind of help on that to see if there is a reason the goal should be changed or shouldn't be changed. And if we're all in agreement on that, it just makes it a little bit easier. So all CASA reports are super important, but this one we really want to make sure that we always have one in on permanency. Lastly, we have the termination of parental rights hearings. This is kind of two parts. So you have the fitness and the best interest. This is where the parents' rights are terminated. This is only used when the goal is adoption. So again, we'll talk about kind of the difference of adoption and guardianship and all of that. But the parents' rights are terminated. Parents no longer have a right to the children. We are often subpoenaed, so this can either come, lately it's been coming in emails. Sometimes the sheriff's department will come to our office and drop them off, and we are called to testify in the best interest portion. So they'll have a fitness portion to see if the parents are able to parent, and then they'll have this best interest portion to see if it's in the children's best interest. Foster parents are often called as well, and they kind of give their input as well. The state often, either Brett or Taylor, will call you and kind of prep you if they think it's necessary. That doesn't always happen. On our website, there are also kind of helpful tips and tricks about how to testify, because I know that could be a little nerve-wracking. But you'll want to just talk to your advocate manager about it. It's not as scary as it seems. So here are 6 types of goals at permanency hearings. So there are more goals than this, but these are kind of the main goals that you will see over and over and over again. Very rarely do you see anything that's not this. So for intact cases, the goal is always remain intact. That's the only goal that they will ever have, is to remain intact. If an intact case no longer becomes intact, then the type of case changes and therefore the goal changes. Then you also have return home in 12 months. This is almost always the first goal when a child is removed from the home. Even if both parents are incarcerated and not getting out for years and years and years, the first goal is almost always this return home in 12 months, because that's the goal. The goal is to reunite under any circumstance. The parents are, they have to be given this right to have their children returned to them. Return home in 12 months is used when parents are on the right track. Things are happening, things are progressing. When you change this goal, it allows parents to be able to participate in additional services. So if you change this goal, housing vouchers can be applied with parents and stuff like that. So this return home goal is helpful to them. Just because a goal is 5 or 12 months does not mean the child's being returned home in that time frame. If the goal's return home in 12 months, a child can be returned home in a month. Or if the goal's return home in 5 months, the child might be returned home in a year. These are goals, and that's what you're hoping for. But you can't ever make promises that that's going to happen or make plans that that's going to happen. It's just the goal, and that's what we're working towards. We also have independence. Um, when the child wants to reach independence, the goal is not return home. The child's not going to be returned home, but as kind of a collective groups, courts, DCFS, CASA, all of us are going to work together to support this child so they can be independent. These cases go until they're 21. We want to make sure they have housing, they have um, proper education, that they have a job. So all of when CASA's gone and the caseworker's gone, they are still able to support themselves. So we really just want to get them on the right track of what they want to do and help them. This can only be used on teenagers. They do have a certain age. I do believe it's 15 and a half, 16, when they'll change a goal, but sometimes they'll start talking about it a little bit earlier than that and just wait until they turn a certain age to make the goal independence. But that's not always our favorite goal. Um, and then we have adoption. Adoption is a permanent option. CASA loves permanency, so we always want a child to be returned home, but adoption's kind of the next intact return home and then adoption. It's these permanent plans. To be adopted, the parents' rights have to be terminated, and the parents are not entitled to any visitation unless the foster parents allow it. So this means that basically, if I were to adopt a child and the neighbor wanted to see the child, I could allow that. It would be just like seeing the natural parents. The adoptive parents get to set that. They can really have no contact, or they can allow as much contact as they want. It's they're not obligated to. Guardianship is not seen as a permanent option. Guardianship means the natural parents still have rights, but they are with basically in kind of like a long-term situation. The natural parents are able to petition the court and restore guardianship, but they have to prove to the court that they're able to care for a child. So just because in 3 years they think that they're able to then parent that child, they still need to go through the whole court process and all of that. They often use this goal when the foster parents are family and the child is older. Um, the previous judge would not use this on any children under a certain age. This judge, we're not sure how he will make decisions, but that's kind of the gist. They'll do it normally when it's family, normally when they're older. So with adoption, parents have no rights. With guardianship, they still do have rights. For both, the foster parents do still get payment regardless. So things to remember at a hearing. You can absolutely take notes. Us as advocate managers, we are also taking notes and then following court etiquette. So you may be asked to introduce yourself. You will sometimes be, so it depends. He's been kind of back and forth, but you'll say your name and CASA. So I would say Alyssa Baltzersen, CASA advocate manager. Um, be quiet when the judge is talking. It can come off as a little disrespectful, especially in that little hallway leading up to the courtroom. If we could just make sure we're quiet in there too, because it does seem to echo in the hallway a little bit. And then dressing appropriately, making sure your phone is silent or completely off. And then waiting until you're outside of the courtroom before asking a ton of questions and making sure you ask those questions in appropriate locations, so not being right next to another person or another case and asking a ton of, you know, confidential questions. But does anybody have any questions or anything that they would like having further details on?
I have a question about whether if there are two parents, natural parents, do they ever share a lawyer or do they always have their own lawyer?
So they, if they are married, so if the natural parents are married, they can share a lawyer. If the natural parents are not married or been divorced, they have to have two separate attorneys. So the only time they can share is if they're married. Oftentimes, even if they're married, they will still have two separate attorneys because if you have the same attorney, you're often fighting for the same goal. And say mom's not doing what she's supposed to be doing and dad is, it's kind of hard. It puts the lawyer in a tough spot. So oftentimes they normally do have different attorneys, but the only time they can share is if they're legally married.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. You know how guardianship goes to another county, not McHenry? Is that still the case? And does that happen with TPR too, or is TPR in McHenry County?
So guardianships still go to other counties. And TPRs, so the trials happen in McHenry County. So you'll be subpoenaed in McHenry County. They'll do the two portions in McHenry County, but the actual adoption won't happen in McHenry County. It will happen in the surrounding.
All right, we have one in chat. I have never had a GAL reach out. How do they know what is going on with the child?
That's a good question. So they are mandated to see the child a certain amount of times a year. Um, if that's happening, I'm not sure. That is a great way to kind of have them go. You can always kind of bridge that gap if you see them in court, like, oh, I'm planning on going a certain time. They know what's going on with the child by reading CASA reports, caseworker reports, um, and kind of just talking with us. And that's often how they know. So our reports are really crucial in how the GAL gets our information.
Uh, Alyssa, you said that sometimes the GAL and one of the other attorneys switch roles. Does the GAL stay with the child that they're assigned to, or do the GAL switch around depending on whose job it is that day?
So it's only switched around like on case. So if Goodwin is the GAL on a case, she will stay the GAL on that case, but maybe the next day there's a new case that comes in and now she'll be dad's attorney. So they don't switch day by day, they switch case by case.
All right, so our next chat question, how long does it typically take between the last court date and an actual adoption?
So after the adoption's finalized, it's about 30 days because there can be appeals and all of that. But they normally have, after the TPR happens, they will set permanency hearings. The first one is normally about 3 months, and then they'll do another one. And those are just checkups. So it kind of is dependent on how quickly the the foster parents obtain an attorney, how fast the adoption happens. But after the adoption's finalized, the caseworker or CASA can notify the court that it happened, and then they'll schedule a hearing for 30 days after that.
And how long are CASAs involved through adoption and guardianships?
They are involved until the case closes in the court. So even though parents' rights may have been terminated, and even if adoption is finalized, guardianship is finalized, you are still technically on that case until it closes in McHenry County.
Do you send our reports to the GAL?
Yes, we send the reports. At the very bottom of the reports, it has the original and it says court, and then it says CC, and it has all of those names of different people. We email those people directly with the report, and we email the GAL, and we can, put little side notes in that weren't necessarily in the report or weren't appropriate for the report, but just a little bit more information that we think is important for them to know. Or recently we just had where, hey, can we have a conversation with you or something like that. So yes, we do send the reports directly to the GAL, and they also are filed into the court system, and the GALs can grab them out of the court system as well.
When we have a best interest case for our TPR hearings, do we submit a CASA report or do we just wait to testify?
So that'll be dependent with your advocate manager. It kind of is a case by case basis. A lot of times you can absolutely submit a CASA report, and then sometimes the state can use that, and sometimes your testimony is enough for in that aspect. So you'll want to talk to your advocate manager when that time comes.
What are the differences you're seeing so far with this new judge?
I would say the main difference is us introducing ourselves. That one not caught us off guard. We love it. But like we haven't really seen this judge make any big decisions. He seems to be holding people to a high standard, which is awesome. Including us, the caseworkers. He wants reports submitted a week prior. He wants service plans to be submitted appropriately. If service plans haven't, there could be repercussions. So he's really just making sure that everything's kind of in line and all of the boxes are checked. So, but we haven't really seen him make any too crucial of decisions. It is taking him a little bit longer just as he's getting familiar with things, but he's doing a really good job.
Can I jump in for a second?
Oh, yes, we met with him this morning.
I met with him this morning, so he will be asking who's in the courtroom. So you will be introducing yourself. If we have he wants the reports a week ahead of time, so he has time to prepare. And if we have something to add that's new or information that would be helpful at the court hearing where he would like us to talk to the state's attorney so they can bring it, like flag it, like, Judge CASA has something to add. He definitely is not opposed to us talking in court if we have things to say. The other thing that will change is the TPR process. The way, if anybody's gone through it yet, TPR, he was doing a trial, or the previous judge was doing the trial, terminating that day, and the next day was best interest. He said they'll be doing the trial. He will be doing, I think a written motion or a written statement on when he terminates, and then so that will be another date that come back to for the decision on the termination, and then there will be a best interest. So the subpoenas will not be for the next day, and we won't have to sit around at all day at the TPRs to see if we're going to get called in. So those are a couple differences that will be happening with this judge.
Do we know how Judge Metz is with the photographs of the kids in the reports? Is he more like Judge Harmon or like Judge Nader?
That is a good question, and I should have asked him that today. I meant to. There's one other question I forgot to ask him, but we will definitely have a conversation with him about that.
Thank you.
All right. How frequent does the judge change? It seems like Judge Nader was there for a year, so is it an annual thing?
It kind of depends. So Judge Nader was there for 2 years. Harmon was there for longer, a lot longer than that.
5. It was over
5, yeah.
5.
Yeah, so there's not necessarily a set time of when they change. It's kind of up to the chief judge. It's up to a lot of different people if they're wanting to move and all of that. So there's no set timeline, and it's just when people want to change and move.
The judge prior to Herman was there, I think, 12 years. So it just depends.
It would be nice to have a little bit more consistency, but I know also sometimes people like changing the judge and all of that because it's fresh eyes on the case, it's new input and all of that. So we we'll see how long I have, there's no set timeline. I think Judge Nader said 2 to 3 years is kind of normal. Um,
All right. If the parents are not together, can one parent's rights be terminated and not the other?
so oftentimes what happens there is the child would just be if the child's being returned home, so the child would be returned home to, we could say, mom, and then in that court order it'll say the child's being returned home to natural mother. And then if natural father wanted custody or guardianship or anything like that, he would then petition to the court to get that. But oftentimes, no, that won't happen. The child will just be returned home to one parent, and then in the court order, it's to who.
And since the judge wants the reports a week in advance, how early does the advocate manager need them?
So that'll be based on your advocate manager. Judge Nader also wanted them a week early, so our timeline shouldn't change too much. If the advocate manager can receive them 2 weeks early, so that gives us a week to edit them and ask you any questions if we have any questions. That seems to be working out well for most of us, but if there's any concerns, you'll want to talk to your individual advocate manager, but 2 weeks seems to kind of be the normal.
Is it the judge's choice to step down?
It can be. The judge can choose to move. The chief judge can tell them they have to move. So it really just does depend. But we're not sure in this situation which one it was, but either way can happen.
All right, that's all I've got in chat. Anybody else have things that they want to ask?
This is Lee. I do have a question, and you might not be able to answer it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. What happens if you go through the whole court process and all the heads around the table are nodding in the same direction that the termination of parental rights should happen, and then it doesn't? Somehow the child is returned back home through some way. What then? Is it over then?
If they sorry, I'll take this.
Yeah, please.
If they get, I know what you're talking about. If there's not enough documentation to proceed with terminating parental rights, then the court has no other option than to continue with return home. Doesn't mean, the goal is return home. Like Alyssa said, doesn't mean they're going home in 5 months or 10 or 12 months or whatever. But it basically means that services have to be continued to be provided to the parents to try to make the reunification possible. Doesn't mean it will be, but then, so it's basically what we're talking about is a delay, additional time for either the parent to step up or not step up, and then it would go to an adoption or TPR.
But there's a process, right? It would be step up, and maybe you have 3 months, let's say, to step up. And let's say you show progress in 3 months. It's not like done then. Then it has to go through the next steps, correct? It's
Right, they
months
continue.
after that.
They have to continue to prove that that reunification is a viable goal, but they are given time. And that's like, sometimes I know when we do the interviews, we talk to you guys, we're saying, our cases last 18 to 24 months, that's average. But we also have, I'm sure some of you are on the call now, and some of the cases are 3-4 years old because of various reasons. Sometimes, it's a caseworker issue. Sometimes it's the parents do just enough, but then they give them more time, and then they give them more, and so they will exhaust all possibility of return home before they'll terminate. I guess that's the easiest way to say it.
I hear you. Thank you.
Are parental rights terminated if the goal is independence? And can there ever be a return home goal after independence was the goal?
So it kind of depends. It is, I know people don't like that. It depends on the case. It kind of depends when the goal turned to independence. There are sometimes where the goals just changed to independence and there's no rights have been terminated. There's also times where their goal was adoption, parents' rights were terminated, but adoption fell through and now the goal is independence. So it can totally change. Oftentimes, once the goal has changed to independence, you're old enough to kind of make those decisions and know what you want. So oftentimes the goal is not return home because at a certain point you can go back and live with mom or dad. So the goal maybe technically can be changed back to return home, but it's oftentimes not because most often when the goal is independence, the judge has had it in camera, which is a meeting between the judge and the GAL, just those two in either the courtroom or a back room, and they talk just openly and off the record. So a lot of times that has happened, and the minors have said what they wanted. So maybe it can happen, but oftentimes that doesn't happen.
Can a case that has gone through TPR be changed back to return home?
Once the parents' rights are terminated, they are terminated. So
Well, they do have 30 days to appeal it. So
Yes.
yes,
But
it is
after, yeah,
possible.
after those 30 days, no.
All right, that's all I've got in chat. Does anybody want to pop in with anything else?
I have one. I decided I'm not going to type. I'm just going to talk. So, so my case, when you say appeal, they've got 30 days to appeal. Does that mean that they just have to get the new attorneys and that's that 30-day, and then they have to go through the appellate court and all that? So they were still
Yes.
like in a holding
Yes.
pattern until they go through that.
Yes, appeals can take a very long time. They just need to start the appeal process within those 30 days. So they just need to file the paperwork really within those 30 days.
And that would have been done like at a motion hearing, because I didn't see that. That was one of the listings, but it seems that happened like with my case. That
Yes, it can happen. It can just be filed. Um, a lot of different attorneys work on appeals. Those appeals aren't necessarily done in this courtroom. So different attorneys work on them. So different paperwork's filed. So oftentimes we're not involved in appeals. We don't really see the appeal paperwork. We're kind of just notified that what happened at the end of the appeal because we know that the child wasn't returned home or, what happened. So we're not really involved in the appeal process at all.
When TPR occurs, as the process is happening, is there always a family? Is it always because there's a family that will adopt, or is there any guarantee there is somebody who is going to be responsible for this child?
That is what, so that's what Illinois and McHenry County specifically likes to do. They don't like to move forward with TPRs if there's not an adoptive home. They want there to be an adoptive home, where there's other places where they'll go through TPR and then find the adoptive home. But in McHenry County, they really kind of stick to having an adoptive home before they move forward with anything. But that's not necessarily a rule or a law or a regulation, so that doesn't need to happen. That's just kind of how we do it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any last questions?
Okay, I have one. So if, Stacy, you know what I'm speaking of. So let's say you have a case where the agency is not demonstrating the kind of documentation that they should be demonstrating on behalf of the child and the family situation, the natural mother, etc. Whose job is it to find that the agency is not tracking? Do you know what I mean? Like, does the judge determine that? Does the lawyer say the agency's not doing their job? Does the GAL do that? Or does no one? Do we just wait for this to run through the system and the dates to get?
Well, it can be any of those. I mean, I have seen where the judge has found, asked for a different agency to be assigned. I have seen it with lawyers have asked for that to happen. Um, I haven't seen it in McHenry County, but I've seen it happen. But it's kind of goes, I'm gonna do a CASA. That's why it's important that in our reports that we report all the things that are going on so that we can bring it to the attention of the court. So yeah, it's in your case is a little bit different.
Sure. Well, and our job as a CASA, right, is not to follow natural mother to make a natural father to make sure they're following their service plan, right? Like we aren't.
No, No,
They're
that
government
is not our
personnel,
responsibility.
right?
That is the caseworkers, but to make sure the kids are getting the services, to make sure the kids are in appropriate homes, to make sure that progress is being made to move the case forward. Those are things that we can report on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, folks. Anything else you've ever thought about? Doesn't
This
have
is
to
super
even be with
helpful.
your case.
If you
Okay.
think of something later, please, you can feel free to contact your advocate manager or myself. If you need to talk about your case further.
All right. So this is recorded and we will have it available up on the Learnings website after I get it downloaded and figured out. So everything will be there for you. Again, like Stacy said, anything that comes up, we are happy to help answer. Thank you, Alyssa, for all that you did to give us all of this information. I hope that you all feel like maybe court makes a little bit more sense next time. Until then, thank you all for participating. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank
Is it
you.
possible to get the presentation deck?
Other than in the recording, I can get it to you. We'll get it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.